Well, the Twitter board has accepted an offer from South African-born billionaire Elon Musk to buy Twitter. It's now up to the shareholders to give the okay, the big stamp, for the $44 billion deal. It's an awful amount of money. It will allow him full control of the powerful and very influential social media platform. Well, at least that's part of the worry. Musk has already said he will allow total unpoliced freedom of speech on the app. Of course, this is leading to concerns to an even greater dissemination of misinformation. And this is where the $44 billion waters get very muddy, don't they, William Bird from Media Monitoring Africa? Hello to you, William. So when you hear that Elon Musk could buy Twitter, what's your first reaction? Do I get a fist pump or a gasp of shock?
I think I'm tending more towards the gasp of shock and a dear sort of kind of moment that Homer Simpson might have, realizing that his favorite beverage is no longer on sale. And it's precisely because you've got someone who does not have a great track record when it comes to freedom of expression, you know, and I think that part of the issue is that what he's doing, right, isn't new. You've got Mark Zuckerberg effectively determining ultimate policy and making policy decisions at Meta/Facebook. So that isn't in and of itself a new thing, but it is an equally concerning thing that you've got one person who seems to determine and have such a massive influence over a platform that is used, around the world. So, the kinds of things he's been talking about are, they sound good, talking about the importance of freedom of expression. But I guess people would be, reasonable to at least be concerned about what direction he might want to take the platform in.
I suppose when you talk about media and you talk about freedom and you talk about media freedom, William, I suppose you need to ask the question, whose freedom and whose media? That's always got to be one of the big questions, doesn't it?
Well, in our context in South Africa, we're really lucky because we've spent the last 28 years of our democracy carefully building up and defining what and where the limits of freedom of expression lie. We've got a fantastic constitution. We've got a very strong series of different media entities, small commercial, community broadcasters. We've got a nice range of diverse media platforms that are there. And those limits have been quite carefully defined, always pushing and trying to err in favor of more media freedom rather than less, right? But when you get someone on that says, well, we need to get rid of these things and reduce content regulations to how we deal with certain issues, that's when you start, certain alarm bells start to ring off, because it sounds like that idea of saying, well, media freedom means you can say anything. And in South Africa, we know that, yes, you can say many things. You can say things that shock and offend. You can say things that do many things, but you can't in certain places. We've accepted, for example, that you don't use the K word. That's a clear incursion on the right to freedom of expression, but it's something that we as a country, the courts, the government, people have said this is not something that's acceptable in South Africa, and we've accepted that. So these things have to be very carefully delineated. And our argument must be done on a rights-based, using a rights-based approach, which is balancing rights off against each other. What concerns us, though, is that you've got, a technology guy who's great at making nice cars and power banks, but this is a completely new field, actually.
I'm going to leave this as my last question to you. I'm going to give you two tweets, ironically enough, on Twitter while I still can, it seems. Elon Musk is going to save Twitter and free speech. This is from Brigitte Gabriel, a well-known US author and advocate for freedom of speech. And then also Sean King on Instagram saying, and I want to quote you, William, if you'll allow me, just get your reaction. At its root, and I'm quoting, Elon Musk wanting to purchase Twitter is not about left versus right. It's about white power. The man was raised in apartheid by a white nationalist. He's upset that Twitter won't allow white nationalists to target and harass people. That's his definition of free speech. Where I'm going with this is there's no grey area on this. You either are completely for this buyout of Twitter or you're completely against it. But you have to also then look at the man and his background, don't you?
Well, you do, but I don't think it's necessarily fair to just draw that distinction about that he was born in apartheid South Africa necessarily means that he is a racist. Certainly that comes with all sorts of issues around white privilege, as we know, and there's a whole range of complex issues that we need to unpack there. And certainly that there is a legitimate concern about a tendency to say that you want to allow white power and a particular version of masculinity, etc., etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he is going to bring that. I think for me, the critical thing here is that what this highlights is, again, the danger of something that has now become effectively a social utility, a platform that all of us use, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, Google, whatever. These things are social utilities, and they need to be governed appropriately in that light. What we can't have is a group of very small group of men in this instance, in most instances, running and determining how these things should operate around the world. That, to me, seems fundamentally and grossly problematic, and that's what I think we need to address. So it's not necessarily him per se as much as it is this idea that one person with no level of accountability to anyone else going on his ideas now has suddenly thrown an entire platform with people going, do we like this? Do we not like this? Is it a good idea, a bad idea? What you need is to say, these are public utilities. They need to be governed according to those kinds of basic rules around rights-based approaches, etc., etc. And then you can start to, talk about what is, whether or not he's a racist or sexist or whatever he may be.
William Bird, always appreciate your time in speaking to us at such short notice, Director at Media Monitoring Africa. What happened to the $6 billion to fight world hunger for the United Nations? Just curious, what happened with that? Here's Nandi Shabala.